Welcome back. My name is Teresa and I am not alive. If anything, I feel like I'm in a coma. I have an awful, garbage, filthy mouth where sometimes, just sometimes, not all the time, who are we kidding, all the time, I use the word fuck as a comma. I know. It's unsavory. But you're here, I'm here. Welcome. If you're not into that or weird stuff in general, then this is definitely not the place for you. Feel free to exit the video here. No harm, no foul. But I'll remember our time fondly. I am so excited to do today's video because we finally get to review oh my god, look at that shift. Oh my god, I totally had like a whole stupid joke, but now I'm like totally blinded by that. Okay, so that was real. Today we're going to be reviewing the new Natasha Denona Triochrome palette, and I'm so excited because I've been waiting for this since it was announced. Now, before I give you my overall thoughts, let me read you a little bit about the palette first.
Natasha Denona Triochrome palette. Revolutionizing colors that pop up your look. Enhance and define your eyes with these new futuristic multi-chrome eyeshadows. Containing 3 different pressed pigment multi-chrome eyeshadows in the center of each row and their complementary matte eyeshadow tones to complete a whole makeup look. Perfect to create a multi-dimensional look with a variety of textures and shades. The top row, Trailblazer, is inspired by those who look outside the box and create avant-garde looks. The middle row, True Enthusiast, by those mastering new techniques to create all types of looks. And the bottom, Total Flip, by those creating everyday, more classic, soft and subtle looks.
Alright, listen, if you're new here, I have a very big love-hate relationship with this brand. I want to love this brand, but this brand wants to file a restraining order against me. To give you a baseline, my favorites from this brand have been all the mini eyeshadow palettes, for the most part, as well as the gold palette. The palettes that are in the $65 range are pretty hit or miss for me, but I have been pleasantly surprised with the majority of the releases this year because I haven't really found a dud yet, with the exception of the highlighter, which just didn't really work for me. I think my favorite release to date is the liquid multi-chrome eyeshadows that were released not too long ago. They're so good that I actually purchased a backup of the Scarab shade. I know, who the fuck am I? That's how much I love it. Now, when this palette was released, my makeup dick got so hard, I impregnated everybody in Queens, New York, okay? And I mean everybody. And then I saw another picture of this palette, and I was surprised. I felt like I was motherfucking catfished.
Why is she so pastel? Who is she?
Is this the bitch I've been cybering with this whole fucking time?
So you're probably saying to yourself, 1, why did I click this video? And 2, what? Follow me. For $129, what do you get? You get 15 shades in this palette. 12 of those shades are the creamy mattes, and the 3 remaining shades, the shades that are in the middle, are the multi-chrome shades. Now, the outside of this package has to be, to date, my favorite Natasha Denona palette of all time. I cannot stop staring at the monitor, and I hate when people like just look at the monitor and not look at the camera. It fucking bugs the shit out of me. I know during editing I'm really gonna fucking hate this, but I cannot stop staring at the shift because in my hands it looks very much purple, but I see in the monitor that it's green, and oh god, it's everything. I love it. When you open them up, you get a nice full-size mirror, and it's a lovely, lovely color story. I'm happy to say while this is not the most perfect match from the initial photo, I would say it's close. Definitely 15 pounds off, you know what I mean? Since this is $129, I figured we should break it down by rows. Let's start with the top row. Needless to say, this is my favorite row. Are you surprised? You shouldn't be. If this row was released as a mini, I would have totally shit my pants. This row is your Bog Witch. The shade Scrap is a cool tone dusty army green color that serves as the palette's darkest shade. I like this shade because it provides dimension, and it also really makes a good lash line shade. The shade next to it is called Androdite, which sounds like a really sexy fucking alien. This shade is a pastel mint color. I really like using this shade as an inner corner highlight. I'm happy to say that when I applied this shade all over the lid, as someone like myself who looks like uncooked chicken, I'm actually able to see the color. So the next shade is Scarab, and this is the first multi-chrome in this palette, and I use that term loosely. This one had the best payoff when using glitter glue. Side note, I don't use setting spray because I have really sensitive eyes, so much so that if I use setting spray with eyeshadows, it gives me a spicy butthole effect. I don't got time for that. So in order to get maximum payoff, it's best if you use your finger or a saturated brush with some water or some glitter glue. When I used the glitter glue, I didn't notice any sort of flaking, kick up, or fallout. It was perfect. And I also noticed that there was no transfer when using the glitter glue. The shade stayed in place and it was beautiful. The shift is not the most amazing green I have ever used. I think when I compare it to other mutant green multichromes that I have in my collection, it's not the best. I think when I compare it to the liquid version, I actually prefer the liquid version more. I feel like I'm able to see the prominent shift within this multichrome. Don't get me wrong, I still really like this shade, but it wasn't what I thought it was gonna be. Now the shade after that is called Ion, and this is a perfect acid green shade. And next to that, you have the shade Vert, which is technically considered a mustard, believe it or not. To be honest, it actually almost feels like a puke green shade next to Ion. However, I mean that in the best way possible. It's funny because I find that if you pair the Vert shade with any other shade in this palette, you could see the mustard shade a little bit more clearly. And again, this is another shade that I had no issues with. All the shades in the top row worked very, very well with each other. They were very pigmented, they didn't require to be built up, they blended with ease, and the longevity is fantastic. Now, when it comes to any sort of kick up and fallout with the mattes, especially when it comes to the pastel mattes or the lighter shades in general, there is a fair amount of kick up and there is some fallout, but I'm happy to say that the fallout is very easy to clean. Now, if you're using all the shades together, again, my only complaint is that the shade Vert gets a little bit lost next to Ion. However, Vert stands on its own if you do not use any other green shade. So it's something to note when playing with this palette. Now the next row is your purple row. The first shade is Naga, which is a beautiful pastel lavender shade. It's super pigmented and it blended beautifully. The shade next to that is called Manganese, and it's described as a vibrant eggplant color. And this will be the second darkest shade in your palette. This is a great shade for deepening the outer corner as well as using it as a lash line shade. Now the next color is Kinetic, and this is the second multichrome of this palette. And I think out of all the multichromes, this one was my least favorite. I think at the end of the day, it really depends on what you pair this shade with. For example, when I was using nothing but purples, I felt like I didn't see a shift at all. However, when I paired it with the green shades, I was able to see a pink shift within the shade. According to the description of the multichrome, there should be some green in the mix, and honestly, it's not very noticeable. Now the next shade is Redox, and it's described as a dusty lilac shade. This is another shade that I had no issues with. And to round out this row, we have the shade Tungsten, which is a really nice mauve shade. However, it's darker on the eye than it is in pan, so I found that kind of interesting. I want to point out that I didn't experience any sort of eye irritation with this row. Actually, the whole palette, I didn't experience any sort of eye irritation, which is actually really surprising considering I usually get some sort of horrible fucking allergic reaction to every red shade possible from Natasha Denona. With the exception of the Love palette, that surprisingly I was fine with. As for any issues with this row, I didn't experience any issues with it. I found them all to be incredibly pigmented, super easy to use, super easy to blend. They work very well together, not only within this row, but within the other rows as well. The only complaint I guess I have is that the shade Kinetic is probably the worst multichrome out of the bunch. And again, much like the first row, there was a fair amount of kick up and fallout from the lighter shades. Now the last row starts with the shade Vertex, which is a very pretty bone color. And it's another shade that's perfect for the inner corner, perfect for the inner portion of the lid, or that gross brow bone highlight people like to do. I liked using this shade to blend a darker shadow to get a nice gradient. The next shade after that is called Plutonium. This is a beautiful orange shade that I really, really loved using, and I think it was actually one of my favorite shades in the whole palette. That shade works with every row in this palette. The next shade after that is Color Flip. And this is the last multi-chrome of the palette, and this one was okay. The shift is more prominent than in Kinetic, but it's still very, very light, and it kind of almost feels like a duochrome in a way. However, this one worked really well with some glitter glue, a saturated brush, as well as a finger. The next shade is Garmin, and that is the taupe shade of the palette. This is the only shade out of the whole palette where I felt like the longevity wasn't the best. I think out of all the shades in this palette, and I have used all of them, I found that this one started to fade after 6 to 7 hours, which I know doesn't sound like a huge deal, but it was something super noticeable compared to the other shades that I didn't experience that with at all. And last but not least, we have the shade Ditonic, which is a very pretty coral shade. It's beautifully pigmented, and I really love pairing this shade with Plutonium, which sounded very weird to say out loud. Again, like the last two rows, I found these to be great. I have no complaints other than the one longevity issue that I experienced with the shade Garmin. And again, it's really not the end of the world. It still lasted for a fair amount of time. Overall, I really enjoyed this palette. The color story is up my alley because I am a garbage bog queen. I think the initial release photos showed a much more grungy color story. However, in person, it's like grunge. Or think of it like corporate punk rock. You have some pops of sticking it to the man, but then you also have some colors that are zoom appropriate. I honestly had a lot of fun playing with this palette, and I really enjoyed creating my weird Beetlejuice-esque looks with it. Most importantly, I didn't feel creatively stunted when using this product. I think there's a nice amount of variety within this palette, and you can create a bunch of different looks. I wouldn't consider this a companion piece by any means. If anything, it's definitely a standalone palette. Now with that said, is it worth $129? Alright, full disclosure. I purchased this palette with the Sephora Rouge reward, meaning that I used a $100 gift card on this palette, ultimately only paying $38 after tax. And if I rate it from a $38 standpoint, oh bitch, this is a home fucking run, okay? This is probably one of my favorite purchases that I've ever made. And I think everyone can agree with that, especially if you only spent literally less than $40 on it. However, if I spent $129 on this, oh, fuck out of here. No. I think for $129, I expected so much more in the multi-chrome department. When comparing this palette to the Pat McGrath Divine Rose palette, even with this palette retailing for $125 and only having one multi-chrome in here, I find that the Pat palette is leaps and bounds better than the multi-chromes that are in this palette. Now, if this palette was similar to, say, some indie multi-chromes or even the liquid multi-chromes that were released not too long ago, I would shut the fuck up right now. I wouldn't be saying this at all. But I think there are so many better options on the market currently that it's like, how the fuck is this worth $129? Now, if this palette was smaller and marketed as one of their $65 palettes, it would make for a more attractive deal in my opinion. As much as I enjoyed playing with this palette, and shit, I really had a fun fucking time playing with this palette, and I could totally see this becoming one of my favorites, I think it's overpriced for what you're getting. You're getting 12 awesome mattes and 3 kinda sorta lackluster multi-chromes. I wish I could just call these fuckers duochromes, but they are multi-chromes. There is a shift, especially when you apply it with your finger, you can totally see the shift. And I guess from that, they're indeed multi-chromes, but not what I or most makeup enthusiasts are used to. I think we're all expecting like, bam, hustler. You know what I mean? Like we're expecting full frontal. Instead, I'm getting fucking JCPenney's lingerie ads. And trust me, no one's getting a boner from that. With that said, I'm torn because I really like this palette and I think it's actually really good quality, but the whole main selling point of it is like, you know what I mean? Like it busted too early. Like I'm so fucking disappointed. Now we're just gonna cuddle on the couch. I think it's a great palette. It's just incredibly overpriced for what you're getting. If you're interested in getting this palette, do yourself a favor and get it while it's on sale. And still then, throw some fucking gift cards on that shit too. With that said, let me know down below how you feel about this palette. Are you gonna be picking it up? Did you pick it up? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Let me know because I love hearing from y'all. And with that said, I wanna say thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate it as always. Feel free to like, comment, hit that subscribe button, it's free, and hit that bell icon for notification of all my future posts. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Patreon, to all my little butter cookie crunch snowflake cupcakes. I love your adorable faces, and I just want to say thank you so much for keeping this disgusting, filthy, gross, smelly garbage boat afloat. I couldn't do it without you. Thank you as always for just, you know, just being too good to me. Like, I love y'all. If you want to know what is currently on my face, along with where to get this Triceratops palette, everything will be listed in the description box below, along with my merch, as well as my podcast, Dead and Bored. Hope everyone's hanging in there. Hopefully your balls of anxiety will soon be deflated, and just keep wearing a mask, keep washing your hands, and just for the love of everything, just be kind and good to each other. And I'll see you little pumpkins later. Bye.